This program is brought to you by the combined resources of the Wisconsin Historical Society and PBS Wisconsin.
We define ourselves as a society by the stories we tell. And if we don't tell the stories of LBGT history, then we're basically erasing them as if they didn't exist.
The history of Wisconsin has long been told from a particular point of view, one that has often concealed LGBTQ+ people.
As I came out as a gay man, I looked for those stories. I have to tell you, those were hard to find.
There can be a tremendous silence about individuals and communities. That silence has not been accidental.
Long hidden, these are stories of extraordinary Wisconsinites.
They're people who blazed a trail, people who did great things.
The resilience of these people in a world that feared them, outlawed them.
But no longer would they be hidden. A movement was born. A stance on freedom was made.
We organized, we learned, we changed things.
These Wisconsinites were liberating themselves. Somehow, despite the oppression and homophobia, they had a place.
Their stories reveal a larger tapestry of our collective past.
It's not just LGBTQ history or queer history, it's also just Wisconsin history.
Wisconsin Pride.
Funding for Wisconsin Pride is provided by Park Bank, S.C. Johnson, Greater Milwaukee Foundation, Evue Foundation, the charitable arm of the Capital Times, CUNA Mutual Group, New Harvest Foundation, West Foundation, Paula Bonner and Ann Schaefer, La Crosse Community Foundation, MG&E Foundation, Rogers Behavioral Health, with additional support from and with support from Focus Fund for Wisconsin Programs and Friends of PBS Wisconsin.
We've been here all along, and nobody knew it. There is a long LBGT history in Wisconsin, but it's been hidden.
We have been erased from the history books.
History is about more than a written record or important dates. It's about people, about the actions they take, even those that go unseen, like finding one's own courage or reaching personal liberation.
It's so important that stories like this be told.
Historians are now revealing a rich history of Wisconsin's LGBTQ+ past, telling stories of adversity, sacrifice, personal triumphs, and history-making moments lost to time.
There's lots of different queer history, and it's not all the same. It's important to know about the past because it explains how we got where we are.
That's part of the hidden history that needs to be unhidden.
If you are living in North America, you're living on Indigenous land, and you need to know the history of the land you're living on. The history of Two-Spirit people is an important part of that.
Two-Spirit is a term used today for Native people, past and present, believed to possess both masculine and feminine spirit. It could be a person born male, but drawn to characteristically female roles throughout their life. Historically, Two-Spirit people were widely accepted by their communities and were known by many names.
We have a really rich vocabulary for describing gender and sexual diversity. In Anishinaabe-Moan, our language, it's Eyekwe. For the Navajo, it's Nudle. For Dakota people, it's Winkte. We have terms for people like us.
Names differed by nation and language, as did a Two-Spirit person's role in their society. But often, Two-Spirit people were highly respected and believed to possess special talents and insight.
It encompasses our worldviews, which are often very different from how Euro-American society defines gender and sexuality.
Though embraced by their communities, Two-Spirit people were met with disdain by Western travelers. In 1830, American artist George Catlin traveled the Mississippi River and witnessed a Sauk and Meskwaki ceremony centered on a Two-Spirit member of the tribe. While the event may have been held in honor of the Two-Spirit, the title of Catlin's painting reveals his attitude toward the subject.
The painting was called The Dance of the Berdache. The term Berdache came to refer to what they would call like a passive homosexual in their derogatory terms. Catlin describes it as one of the most disgusting and abhorrent facets of the New World, that it should be eradicated before it even can be recorded in any more detail.
The Europeans who came to the New World brought very specific views about those who deviated from heterosexual norms. Eventually, those norms would be rigidly enforced.
Starting in the late 1800s, there was a big push to civilize Native people. The United States government and often also the religious organizations that ran many of the boarding schools were trying to make the kids into cookie cutters of American boys and American girls.
For Two-Spirit people, this was especially traumatic.
There are stories of Two-Spirit people who disappeared essentially from boarding schools. Once discovered to be Two-Spirit, they were taken away and never seen again.
As Wisconsin became a territory in 1836, laws were created that called for harsh punishments for homosexual acts. The topic was widely considered taboo and kept out of conversation until 1895, when world events thrust it onto headlines across the globe.
London was the world's capital. Wisconsin newspapers would have a column from London talking about the arts and political happenings. Oscar Wilde was the toast of the town.
Playwright Oscar Wilde was one of the first global celebrities. He had even visited Wisconsin on a speaking tour. But in London in 1895, he was put on trial, and his homosexuality was exposed in salacious detail.
The coverage reveals a total negative perception about homosexuality. Wilde's disgrace and shame for Oscar. One paper ran with the headline, "Wilde not yet a suicide," as if he should certainly be one.
In La Crosse, Wisconsin, the city's many newspapers ran updates on Wilde's trial in 1895. That year, George Coleman Pogue was coming of age and entering La Crosse High School.
Pogue was a very intelligent young man. We know that he was a voracious reader. It's not out of the realm of possibility that he was reading about the trial of Oscar Wilde, gaining a very clear sense of what America and indeed what the world thought about gay men.
Pogue's story reveals the challenges of telling LGBTQ+ history from a time when true identity had to be a closely guarded secret, one Pogue would carry his entire life.
Homosexuality very often has been something that society has viewed as shameful, and there can be a tremendous silence.
Pogue graduated from La Crosse High School as salutatorian, then went on to the University of Wisconsin to study history. He would make history himself by stepping onto the track.
When he joins the track team, lo and behold, he is the first African American on the track team at the University of Wisconsin-Madison.
Pogue excelled at the hurdles, a standout, earning himself an invitation to compete at the 1904 Olympics. The 1904 Olympic Games were held as a part of the World's Fair in St. Louis, a notoriously segregated city. Even as a competitor on the world stage, Pogue was isolated from his fellow athletes when not competing.
He would have been with them, but not regarded quite as the same. He spent the vast majority of his life living in that kind of America.
Segregated, alienated, Pogue would not waver. In St. Louis, history was waiting for him at the finish line.
He won 2 bronze medals, making him the first African American to win medals at the Olympic Games.
George Coleman Pogue, from La Crosse, Wisconsin, was among the world's best. A triumph and a moment for American history. However, in the subsequent decades, Pogue's achievements would be nearly forgotten. That would start to change when UW-La Crosse historian Bruce Mauser helped revive interest in the athlete.
From my dad's perspective, Pogue's story was one that just hadn't received the recognition that it deserved. It seemed to have been forgotten by history, just not documented.
As Bruce Mauser started to document Pogue's post-Olympic life, certain clues began to emerge, pointing to a hidden aspect of Pogue's story. He resigned a St. Louis teaching position under a cloud of suspicion. He moved to Chicago's gay-friendly Cabaret District.
Pogue also joined the Chicago Athletic Club, considered a social outlet for gay men.
Pogue had to keep quiet or downplay many of the things that made him who he was.
Bruce Mauser had clues that supported a theory that Pogue had been a gay man, but he didn't feel that he had enough evidence to make this claim.
To out someone after their passing has considerable impact, and I think he wanted to be respectful not only of Pogue, but with the family. Is that part of his identity they wanted to share?
It's been years in the making, but today Pogue Park officially had its grand opening ceremony.
Mauser's research had helped ignite interest in the community about their historic Olympian. Pogue's relatives came to La Crosse for the park dedication. Mauser was unprepared for what happened when meeting Pogue's grandnephew.
The nephew, really in sort of a casual way, sort of, you know, my uncle was gay. It made it possible for him to complete Pogue's story.
It's really about giving a full account of the individual's life. A person's sexuality also matters in the sense that this is a part of their identity.
It was uncovering a life.
Over 100 years after making Olympic history, George Coleman Pogue was welcomed home.
For there to be acknowledgement for who Pogue was, both as an athlete and as a man.
For a man like Pogue, the early 20th century's social and legal limitations on sexual expression forced him into a hidden life. Across the state in Milwaukee, another man of the time, Ralph Carwinio, was hiding in plain sight.
Ralph Carwinio was a Black and Native man who was extremely stylish. If you look at his photos, he's got it going on. For sure.
Carwinio's style would fly in the face of the era's strict policing of gender expression.
Ralph became briefly infamous in Milwaukee in 1914. He was arrested by the police for allegedly passing as a man and marrying 2 women. He was known as the Girl Man of Milwaukee.
Born in Kendallville, Indiana, and raised as Cora Anderson, Carwinio hoped for a career in one of the few fields available to women. In 1900, while in nursing school in Chicago, Carwinio met Mamie White, and the two started out life together. However, both struggled to find work at a time when immoral doctors could take advantage, demanding sexual favors before hiring. With few opportunities, the 2 young nurses calculated a man's wage would make their life together much better.
They decided to move to Milwaukee, and this person started to live as the person known as Ralph Carwinio.
Carwinio found work as a bellboy at the Plankington Hotel, then as a factory hand. White kept care of their home. They appeared to all as a traditional husband and wife. Then, as happens in many relationships, troubles began.
Ralph, in Mamie's eyes, started to get too comfortable with his expression as a man. Coarse in his habits, going out with other men after work. Eventually, they split. And a little while later, Mamie discovered that Ralph was seeing Dorothy Kleinowski and that they were, in fact, getting married.
Hurt and angry at Carwinio, White showed up at his workplace under the guise of applying for a job. Told that they had no work suited for women, White revealed they already had a female employee and uncovered Carwinio's secret.
This blew up all over the papers.
Carwinio was arrested. In 1914, it was against the law to wear the clothes of another gender.
I can't imagine being incarcerated and then paraded through newspapers, having your name dragged all over the place.
The name being dragged was Cora Anderson, the identity Carwinio had long left behind. His effort to live honestly as he saw himself would be called dishonest and deceptive.
It's a story that tells us a lot about the way gender-variant people have been criminalized in the past.
Carwinio was forced into a dress as part of a sensational public trial. The overflowed crowd laughed when, under oath, he had no choice but to say he was a woman.
He was released as long as he promised that he would return to wearing skirts, as they put it.
At the end of the trial, Kerwinio was quoted, "When we leave this court, Kerwinio will be dead. My name when I leave here will be Cora Anderson." But Ralph Kerwinio would not die.
After his arrest, he went around with some vaudeville circuits. He would start off the show dressed as a woman, then show up as a man, vice versa.
And he kept presenting as male for long after the infamous trial.
I think it shows a lot of resilience on Ralph's part. It was 1914, and we can't necessarily apply labels from today to somebody who lived 100 years ago. But he said his woman's soul had died and a man's soul had taken his place. Ralph was going to do whatever Ralph wanted. Whoever he was, he had a strong spirit and free will.
Despite his strong spirit and free will, mainstream America was not ready for Ralph Kerwinio to live his full life freely among them. Society had rejected him. In this same era, another Wisconsin man found his solution to living freely by building his own personal oasis, removed from society and even time.
Ralph Warner of Cooksville, I call Wisconsin's first out gay man.
An eccentric, living a lifestyle from a century before his time, Ralph Warner entertained guests at his home and personal preservation project, which he named The House Next Door. The old building on a small plot in rural Wisconsin was Warner's very own gateway, transporting him from the 1920s back to the mid-1800s.
He was an unusual character and doing an unusual thing, sort of liking old stuff. People were tossing that stuff away.
Warner's interests ran counter to the mood of his times as 1920s America became more urban and less rural. His deliberate effort to slow the increasingly frenetic pace of life caught the attention of magazines and newspapers.
The word was out, good housekeeping, house and garden. Ralph Warner put Cooksville on the map.
Warner's land of long ago promised more than a collection of antiques and old-fashioned meals. It was a place where one could live a different life.
Warner was really, in some ways, ministering to certain people who were looking for something to soothe their angst about the ways in which American life was changing. But then, ironically, the automobile, which in some ways was the bane of preservation, was also the lifeline that brought people to Cooksville to find their hours of respite in Warner's creation of The House Next Door.
Ralph Warner's House Next Door was charming, just a charming little place. People called it a wee bit of England in Wisconsin.
Summer evenings with the windows open, the sound of song and piano from The House Next Door traveling through this little village.
But the main attraction was Ralph Warner himself.
He tells one lady who comes to look at his curios, "We should look at me, I'm the most curious thing here." So he had just sort of created this persona for himself, and they gave fairly good clues about who he was.
Warner defied the strict gender norms of the 1920s. He entertained his visitors by cooking and serving the meals himself. He designed and curated the interior of his home and tended his traditional English garden.
It's representative of a certain strain of the gay sensibility. It includes that love of things related to the home and decor, things related to hospitality and caregiving.
By presenting himself as who he was in his own way, for his own time, coming out, which is really quite remarkable for the 1920s.
Through the house next door, Warner had created his own personal haven, a place removed from time, where people could be who they wanted to be.
He really viewed it as a sacred little space that he would share with people. Like-minded, kindred spirit type people.
Ralph Warner's The House Next Door was a predecessor to the coming heritage tourism movement in Wisconsin. The next generation to undertake historical preservation often looked to Warner as an inspiration. Such was the case for Edgar Hellam, who still remembered Warner well when interviewed in his 90s.
Mr. Warner, Ralph Warner, had an old house that he had restored, and he served meals. That's what gave me the bug.
In 1934, Hellam met Bob Neal. Through a shared passion for old buildings, a life partnership would develop. In a letter sent right after their meeting, Hellam gushed, "Bob Neal, just the name makes the weekend seem like make-believe." The two men lived at a time when they needed to keep their love for each other a secret. However, the life's work they built together would draw attention and admiration for generations. In the early 1800s, prospectors swarmed southwestern Wisconsin in search of lead ore. They dug caves into the hillsides reminiscent of badger holes, earning the namesake, the Wisconsin Badgers. In the 1830s, Cornish immigrant miners settled in the boomtown of Mineral Point, building tiny stone cottages for their family homes.
These are very small, modest dwellings, some of which seem to almost grow out of the bluff behind them.
By the mid-1930s, the cottages had been long abandoned. They were being torn down for their materials. But where others saw ruin, Edgar Hellam and Bob Neal saw beauty.
Bob said, "I found the house," but he said, it's so decrepit. He said, "I don't know whether it can be fixed or not. Can you come over and take a look?" And he had found Pendarvis' house. Oh, God, it was awful.
So for $10 and a dream, the two men purchased the cottage and set about restoring it.
People thought they were kind of nuts. These two young men down on the slummiest street in town, living together in one of these rundown stone cottages, a lot of people thought should just be knocked down.
It was an unusual thing to happen in a small Wisconsin town. They were often described as artistic young men. And it probably was true in that you had to have some sense of what could be, which is what artists do, is they create something out of almost nothing.
After many months of working 16-hour days, Hellam and Neal had restored the home to its 1800s aesthetic. They gave it the Cornish surname, Pendarvis.
Bob and Edgar were thrilled, but needed to make some sort of a living from it.
They started with opening a small tea room at Pendarvis. But it soon evolved into a quaint restaurant, embracing the historic identity of the locale. For their signature dish, Bob Neill turned to his family's old Cornish recipes and landed on the pasty.
Even though the food itself was very basic, almost kind of like a peasant food in a way, there was a touch of finesse to the meal.
We made the best pasty that anybody made in Minnow Point. We used top-grade beef, we had a good crust recipe, and then it had to come right from the oven to the table. Simple, farm fare, but we did it with a touch of class.
The focus was not fine dining. The focus was the experience.
A pasty was served with a flourish for the table to share, while Bob Neill told tales of the Cornish miners who had settled Old Mineral Point.
Bob Neill clearly had a vision for what heritage tourism could be.
By the late 1940s, Pendarvis House Restaurant had become a niche destination. The tiny operation received national visibility after being included in an influential travel guide written by food critic and later cake box celebrity Duncan Hines.
Duncan Hines, he said, "Don't change a thing, don't change a thing."
Over the next several decades, Neill and Hellam acquired additional stone cottages in Mineral Point, a restoration project that became their life's work, and one of Wisconsin's most visited historic sites.
Pendarvis really sparked and grew historic tourism here in Wisconsin.
Gay men made an extraordinary contribution in preservation. Both Warner and Bob Neill and Edgar Hellam, they were really early advocates for cultural tourism.
The two men complemented each other. Neill handled the food and championed Cornish lore, while Hellam brought the old buildings back to life. Though it was an age when they needed to keep their love for each other a secret, their shared vision and artistic endeavor endures to this day.
It's a remarkable story of how two gay men led their lives to create this artistic and historic place. It's not just part of the Cornish lore, but it's part of the gay history of the state.
While Pendarvis was a passion to preserve, another couple was embracing change, exploring a new and radical art movement through their school in Milwaukee.
The Leighton School of Art was started by two women in 1920, Miss Partridge and Miss Frink.
Charlotte Partridge and Miriam Frink met at Downer College for Women in Milwaukee in 1915. Historically, women's colleges were a place where romantic female relationships could safely thrive. For Partridge and Frink, their love and commitment for each other thrived for more than 50 years.
Charlotte Partridge was charismatic. She was just sort of lovable, right? She smiled a lot. She was the gregarious one. Miriam Frink, she was much more serious and let Charlotte be the front person.
The two made friends with Milwaukee businessman Frederick Leighton, the meat-packing millionaire who had opened the Leighton Gallery in 1888 and filled it with grand works purchased on his travels. In 1920, Leighton offered the gallery basement to Partridge and Frink to hold classes. But the art they would inspire would be radically different from the old works that filled the gallery's walls.
Charlotte Partridge and Miriam Frink were more aligned with what was happening in terms of the European avant-garde.
European avant-garde movements like Cubism and Dadaism challenged artistic conventions, shocked some, and spoke deeply to others.
For Charlotte Partridge and Miriam Frink, they brought these avant-garde ideas into their teaching, into their own art collection in their home, and embraced it.
In the house the couple had designed and built together, they hung modern works of art, at home among bold, creative expressions.
There's a pretty strong connection between queer identity and avant-garde movements. There's something about growing up knowing you're different from what the rest of society says people should be. Just makes you more open to new ideas.
New ideas fueled Partridge and Frink's avant-garde art school.
The Leighton School of Art was basically an incubator for creative expression.
Like Europe's Bauhaus, the Leighton School put art and design on equal footing. Nude drawing classes were attended by students of both sexes, something previously unheard of in Milwaukee. Generations of graduates would contribute to the city's art scene and design of its products.
They're developing these creative minds. It really sent a lot of people out into the community with this training and this understanding of what was possible.
All things seemed possible for the Leighton School. Through the Great Depression, the two leaders took no salary to stay open. During World War II, they held free art shows intended to build public support for the war effort. After the war, enrollment boomed. Partridge and Frink would greet the 1950s with a bold plan for a new modern home for the school. But times were changing.
The 1950s were not a good time to be a woman, definitely not a good time to be a queer woman. They had just raised all the money to build this amazing building. Then it was determined that it wasn't appropriate for two women to be leading a school of national reputation.
The Leighton School's male-dominated board forced Charlotte Partridge and Miriam Frink to leave the school they founded and nurtured for decades. Their last work was scratching a pencil edit to the board's resolution, making it crystal clear that their retirement was not voluntary. Without their leadership, the Leighton School ultimately struggled. Its sleek headquarters were condemned for a highway project in the late 60s. A few short years later, the Leighton School closed. The doors shut on a life's endeavor. The couple remained involved in Milwaukee's community, with Partridge leading efforts in building senior housing. Their impact on the city's art scene would live on. In 1974, a group of former Leighton School instructors started the Milwaukee Institute of Art and Design. MIAD continues today as a world-class art and design school, training students in understanding what's possible. A legacy sparked by Charlotte Partridge and Miriam Frink.
I discovered what can I say badass? I discovered what total badasses they were. These stories are beginning to emerge that gay and lesbian people are making a huge difference in our culture. They're people who blazed a trail for me to be able to be who I am, but they're also people who did great things.
Throughout the early 20th century, the LGBTQ+ community made significant yet unsung contributions to Wisconsin history. They were also there to contribute, to step up when world history turned dark. As Nazi Germany swept across Europe, Americans joined the fight for the free world, including gay men. hoping their commitment to the war effort would lead to greater inclusion back home. But gay soldiers would have to serve in silence.
Gay men were fighting in the service, even though the service didn't want them.
Unwanted, yet undeterred, gay men answered the call.
They not only had to fight the homophobia of the military system, but then they had to fight fascism too.
Motivated by the prospect of a freer society after the war. This was especially true for a young soldier from Rhinelander, Wally Jordan.
During the war, Wally Jordan was having gay pen pals that he was keeping a correspondence with.
Jordan's letters provided personal insight into gay men who communicated frankly, despite the risk of discovery, sharing their thoughts on the war, hopes for the future.
He writes in these letters that he has a vision that after the war, there will be a big national conference of gay men where they will proudly proclaim their rights and demand that they be respected. After World War II, there could be a better world, and that better world ought to encompass the gay men who had been fighting to win the war for the Allies.
But a hero's welcome would not be waiting, even for those who put it all on the line. Lieutenant Kenneth Palmer from Edgerton, Wisconsin, was a decorated war hero. Surviving over 50 dangerous missions, including a harrowing bombing run over Munich. As he navigated his B-24 bomber over his target, the plane took on heavy anti-aircraft fire. A piece of flak ripped through the nose of his plane, sending shrapnel flying toward Palmer. His jacket took the brunt, shredding into pieces. But the young navigator miraculously walked away with little more than a few bruises and a story for the ages. He quipped, "If they can come that close and not get me, I'm safe." After the war, Kenneth Palmer returned to college at the University of Wisconsin-Madison. He and so many of his fellow veterans were looking to catch up on the years and opportunities lost to the war. Palmer studied commerce and served as secretary and also performer in the extracurricular theater troupe, the Hare's Foot Club.
Hare's Foot was a theatrical organization that formed on campus in the late 1890s. And they were very popular at the time. They would perform 6, 7, 8 sold-out shows. Then they would get on the train and they would do a tour. They thought it was good publicity for the university, but they didn't like the idea of sending men and women out together on the road. It turned into one of these all-male companies where men played the women's roles.
The Hare's Foot motto became, "All our girls are men, yet everyone's a lady."
They'd go to Eau Claire and La Crosse, sometimes to St. Paul, and do their shows. It was the Wisconsin idea in drag.
Though the company was predominantly heterosexual, there were a lot of gay men who were attracted to Hare's Foot.
The theater was a sanctuary.
You have both sexuality and gender identity all mixed up together.
The element of drag allowed performers to experiment with gender roles publicly, to be expressive about sexuality, under the protection of theatrical satire.
Hare's Foot was willing to push those boundaries.
In 1948, the Haresfoot Club was celebrating its 50th anniversary with an original show, Big as Life, a send-up of the legendary Paul Bunyan myth. The cast included senior Kenneth Palmer, donning a red wig to portray the female role of Mabel. The group's 50th year would be a fateful one.
A university police officer found two men making out in a car on campus, and he arrested them. In their car was an invitation to a party at a private home.
Police raided the Adams Street house party and made arrests on morals and sodomy charges.
Two of the men involved in that sting operation were members of Haresfoot.
Kenneth Palmer was arrested, his name and address printed in the newspaper. The press called the home a den for lewd activities.
On campus, there was concern about this growing outbreak of homosexuality. And so there was an investigation launched of the Haresfoot Theater Troupe.
The investigative committee called upon psychiatrist Dr. Annette Washburn for guidance.
Dr. Washburn had a classification of homosexuals. She believed that there were pseudo-homosexuals that could be treated. True homosexuals were a danger on campus, and she really believed that the university needed to get rid of those people.
Kenneth Palmer completed his requirements for graduation, but at the highest levels of the university, his degree was denied.
There's a belief that to graduate gay men into society is a stain on the university. It's appalling. It's regrettable. It's unfathomable. Yeah.
In 1950, Cold War tensions were brewing in Korea. War hero Kenneth Palmer anticipated a return to service. He pleaded with the university to have his degree granted, emphasizing that it would be unlikely for him to rise through the officer ranks without a diploma. Once again, he was denied. Fallout from the Haresfoot scandal would not end with Palmer. A silent force would push the next generation of gay students deeper into hiding.
I was at home in my apartment one day in 1962, and the phone rang. It was one of my friends. He explained to me that there was this purge going on to rid the university of gay male students.
Louis Bosworth, he is one of only two former students that have ever spoken publicly about their involvement in the Purge.
The Purge was a systematic effort to identify gay students and staff and discreetly remove them from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. The policy was a carryover from the paranoia of the 1950s, starting with the Red Scare.
Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
Which led to the Lavender Scare, a campaign to ban homosexuals from working in the federal government.
Gays and lesbians really became the scapegoats. It is assumed that gay men and lesbians are actually threats to national security and that they can be blackmailed.
The hunt for homosexuals at the university began as a response to the Haresfoot scandal. 14 years later, in 1962, the Purge pressed on.
The Dean of Men, Dean Zillman, started to compile a list of hundreds of male homosexuals on campus. And he would call people in and ask them to name names, which was clearly a McCarthy-type tactic.
Theodore Zillman had been an attorney and personally questioned suspected homosexuals. Heavy consequences awaited those who confessed.
The university would inform parents. Basically, it would force the kids to come out.
They were ruining people's lives, kicking out people right before graduation. There are cases of students attempting suicide. You read these transcripts, it's heartbreaking.
One name on Zillman's list was sophomore Louis Bosworth.
I was getting calls from the dean's office to come in, and I ignored it as long as I could, simply on the grounds that it wasn't any of their business.
Dean Zillman didn't like it when people didn't respond to his request.
A detective from the university police came to my place of employment and threatened me. And so I finally did go to the Dean of Men's office. They certainly were a whole lot worried about gay men, young men.
Dean Zillman interrogated him. It must have been terrifying to be on the receiving end of an interrogation about your sexuality in the 1960s.
I was afraid that I might be expelled. Well, I lied through my teeth when he asked me if I was homosexual. Since I denied everything, there wasn't anything they could do with me.
But Dean Zillman had other plans.
I had been accepted to a program abroad, a junior year abroad program. Well, they reneged on that. They took away the scholarship. I graduated in '64. There were other people involved in that who fared less well than I did.
Hunted, harassed. The university's years-long purge ensured that hundreds of gay students would never make it to graduation.
It was important to their quote-unquote investigation to get as many names on their list as they could, and I refused to do that. I didn't give them any names.
Defiant in the face of bigotry, Louis Bosworth went on to become an outspoken activist. He later returned to UW-Madison and built a career centered on welcoming students, helping them navigate the college experience rather than kicking them out.
It was spring of 2013, I went into the LGBTQ plus graduation ceremony, and sitting at one of the tables was Louis Bosworth, sitting by himself. I was stunned. I said, Louis, what is it like for you to be at this? He says, Scott, it's unimaginable. When I was at this age, this would have been unimaginable.
One of the amazing things about Wisconsin is that early on, gay and lesbian people found ways to affirm their own identity. In their own way, they could achieve a certain amount of liberation.
You can learn to understand people if you know their history.
A history often hidden, but history would soon be made out in the open.
Well, the battles never end. There are forces really that come together that try to turn the tide.
A movement to be part of the American story, to no longer live a hidden life.
People were liberating themselves, knowing that their lives were something that they had to live and were valid to live. Wisconsin has been a trailblazer in ways that very few people understand. And that's an important story to tell.
The 1960s sparked a sea of social change across America. With it, the gay rights movement.
We often hear about what happened in San Francisco, what happened in New York City, but we don't hear about what happened in Wisconsin.
In Wisconsin, LGBTQ+ people were ready to make a statement about freedom, to live openly, and to change American history. But it all began with a distinctly Wisconsin institution: the neighborhood bar.
Taverns are ubiquitous in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin really was a breeding ground for bars of all different kinds. There were bars that were Serbian, there were bars that were African American, there were bars that were Polish. So the idea of there being bars dedicated to gay people shouldn't be surprising to anyone.
In the post-World War II era, gay bars began to find a footing among a booming population. Though intense secrecy surrounded their existence, they started to play a pivotal role in LGBTQ+ lives.
They went there to find community, they went there to find love, they went there to find hope.
You make friends, develop networks, and gradually begin to develop knowledge of what the gay world is.
About the only place you could actually be gay, since you had to be straight at work and in your family, was at a gay bar.
The bars themselves kept a low profile, hoping to avoid attention from the police.
It's almost like a holdover from the speakeasy culture. It won't be marked, right? The entrance is in the back. If they don't recognize you, they won't let you in, sort of a thing.
It was not uncommon for police raids to occur in gay bars. The enforcement of norms and homophobia was a routine activity in those days.
The police could carry out genital searches. Same-sex dancing could lead to an arrest. And bar owners could lose their license if caught serving homosexuals.
The consequences were really extreme, and people still dared to live their best life. They still went out looking for each other, eager to find each other in a world that was actively trying to shut them down.
In the summer of 1969, in New York City, 6 days of protests and clashes with law enforcement erupted following a police raid of the Stonewall Inn, a local gay club. The Stonewall Uprising would become famous as the catalyst for the gay rights movement in America. But anger had been brewing across the country well before Stonewall became a flashpoint.
8 years before Stonewall, the Black Knight Bar was the scene of the first LGBTQ uprising in Wisconsin history.
A rainy August 5th, 1961. After a night out on the town, 3 sailors found themselves outside the Milwaukee gay bar, the Black Knight. The servicemen had been sent there on a dare. When asked to show their ID at the door, they panicked, dragged the bouncer outside, and attacked him. A nearby bar patron refused to stand by and do nothing.
The heroine of the Black Knight was Josie Carter, an African-American, gender nonconforming queen of color.
I'm Josie Carter, and oh gosh, look out.
Josie ran out there with a beer bottle in each hand and knocked one of the sailors unconscious and hit the other one over the head. They dragged their friends out of there and said they'd be coming back to teach gay people a lesson.
Bullied as a child, a survivor of sexual violence, Josie Carter refused to be harassed any longer.
I have to be me. If I can't be me, what the hell?
Josie really was everyone's best friend.
For Josie Carter and her friends, the Black Knight Bar was a second home, a place worth fighting for.
Just let me live my life, you live yours, and we're gonna look beautifully.
She warned the others in the bar about the attack, rallying them to stand their ground.
People got really mad because they were like, we have this one space. We have this one space in Milwaukee we can go and be ourselves and dress however we want and express however we want. And now they're coming in here and harassing us. And Josie's response was, we don't run from a fight.
I'm not a runner. I mean, high heels or nothing, I'm sorry, I do not run.
The sailors returned with about a dozen others and reinforcements, but were in for a surprise.
The sailors were met by 74 bar patrons who were mad as hell and not taking it anymore.
The two sides clashed.
The brawl literally destroyed the bar. All the windows were broken, all the glass in the bar was broken. Everything was just destroyed.
The police broke up the fight and arrested the three sailors. The violence that night drove the headlines. But a larger message was sent.
Other gay people saw news clippings about the Black Knight Brawl and said, oh my gosh, there are people like me. And they're not putting up with it, and they are fighting back. This was a big deal in 1961.
Beyond a place of refuge, the gay bar became a symbol of liberation, galvanizing a community.
There wouldn't be a gay movement without gay bars.
The Black Knight was the first in a series of dominoes that fell that really advanced Wisconsin on the national landscape in terms of gay rights, gay protections, and gay awareness.
But the fight for equality was only just beginning, and an age of activism would soon follow.
The 60s had seen a whole range of activism here in Wisconsin. You had the anti-war movement, which is very strong on the Madison campus. In Milwaukee, you had a push for black civil rights. There was a sense that there was this activism which was a way to change things.
Sisterhood is powerful.
A generation began to rise up during a time of political and social strife, advancing a variety of movements, including gay rights.
There was this impetus that it was time to do something. Stonewall sent that signal, and people responded to it.
In 1969, Time magazine's cover story, The Homosexual in America, put gay life into the national conversation. This inspired an anonymous writer at the University of Wisconsin-Madison to publish an open letter in the campus paper, calling for homosexuals to band together.
They started by calling themselves the Madison Alliance for Homosexual Equality.
The Madison Alliance for Homosexual Equality was recognized as the first gay organization in Wisconsin.
Just months after Stonewall, they were on the local news channel. You know, out queers are on television in the state of Wisconsin. In March, they hold the first publicly announced gay dance. They have the first protest.
The group protested outside a Madison theater, playing the film The Boys in the Band.
They felt It depicted self-loathing homosexuals. The early activists particularly found that despicable as a portrayal.
You're a sad and pathetic man. You're a homosexual and you don't want to be. But there's nothing you can do to change it.
While they were picketing, they heard shouts of faggots from young kids in cars driving by. But it was very brave to do that kind of public action, to go out and be visible homosexuals in the community. You found other people who were willing to be out, and that gave you strength.
By 1971, the group had adopted the name the Gay Liberation Front and had been attracting new members across campus, including an anti-war activist named Judy Greenspan.
I can't count the number of times I was tear gassed. There was like a revolutionary spirit on campus. We were all part of this progressive movement, and it was a massive movement.
A New Jersey native, Judy Greenspan came to school at UW-Madison, drawn by the anti-war movement. Finding like-minded people fighting for a cause, Greenspan was still looking for something more. Searching for other lesbians.
So I found out where the Gay Liberation Front was meeting. I went to a meeting, and there were literally about 45 young men and one woman. I just said, this is ridiculous.
Determined to build a sisterhood, Judy Greenspan and a friend began to post flyers on campus, calling for lesbians to come together. What Greenspan did not expect was the reaction from comrades in the anti-war movement when they saw the flyers.
People would say, well, what are you organizing? And they'd look at it and their jaw would drop. And then they'd sort of walk away. So the amount of homophobia in the anti-war movement, I thought, was pretty deep. I don't see the dichotomy between being a political person fighting for social change and being queer. I don't. I think they're together.
Greenspan's grassroots organizing helped form the group that would become known as Madison Lesbians.
We didn't have the community, we had to build the community. And we just did it the best that we could. You know, could somebody have done it better? Probably. But we did it. We did it.
Together, Madison Lesbians and the Gay Liberation Front traveled around the state, working with emerging gay organizations at other college campuses on LGBTQ+ issues. But at home, they would find themselves locked out when students at Madison East High invited Greenspan to speak.
The principal ruled that no out lesbian Judy Greenspan couldn't come and speak. In fact, the Madison Principals Council ruled that they wouldn't allow any homosexual speakers in the high schools.
And the school board totally backed him up on it. Everybody, was saying, oh yeah, I mean, that's a no-brainer. Gay people are sick, they're ill, it's illegal. Can't let them in the schools.
The ban not only kept gays and lesbians out, but also put any closeted students or teachers at risk. The Madison Lesbians and activist Judy Greenspan decided to take a stand for gay rights.
We fought back by running an openly lesbian candidate for school board. And I said, oh yeah, I'll do it. So as a lesbian, I could not go into the schools. I couldn't speak to the students. I couldn't get through the door. But as a candidate, they would not be able to deny me entrance.
As a candidate, she would appear on forums that were in the high school and be able to debate. It was a very inventive way to challenge the ruling of the principal.
We were not running to be part of the political system, but we really ran as a way to protest what we thought is a horrible injustice.
Greenspan would not win the 1973 school board election, but would make history as the first out lesbian to run for public office in America, and the first in a long line of LGBTQ+ people who sought office in Wisconsin.
Wisconsin is the only state to have elected 3 out Congress people: Steve Gunderson, a Republican, Mark Pocan, a Democrat, and the first U.S. out Senator Tammy Baldwin.
For Judy Greenspan, it was about seeking justice, taking a public stance for those who couldn't.
It was definitely one of the proudest things that I've done in my life.
Welcome once again to Gay Perspective, the radio voice of Gay People's Union. We're going to be interviewing a young lady who happens to be a homosexual. But first, let's have a little music.
The nation's first LGBTQ+ radio program, Gay Perspective, hit the airwaves in 1971.
This program will discuss a gay perspective.
Produced in Milwaukee by the activist organization Gay People's Union to serve a community finding its voice.
Today, throughout the country, homosexuals are clamoring for their rights.
Within 10 years of the Black Knight Brawl, Milwaukee had really come together as a community of LGBT people looking to not just find each other socially, but to socially activate and organize. One of the organizations that came out of this era was Gay People's Union.
Gay People's Union was founded in 1971 by 2 openly gay men, Eldon Murray and Alan Hess.
Being able to be openly gay, they were able to do so much work for the community and for the gay liberation movement.
This was a time where people could be fired from their job just for being gay.
Eldon Murray, who served in Korea, then worked as a stockbroker, was quoted, "My clients didn't care as long as I made money for them. I could stand up and be openly gay when few people could." Standing alongside him was gay rights crusader Alan Hess, a landscape architect turned social activist.
They established the first gay crisis hotline in Milwaukee. They opened the first gay community center. And they also fought with local newspapers about printing the names of people arrested for disorderly conduct and got them to end that policy, which was a lifesaver for many, many gay people.
They were remarkable pioneers in the fight for gay rights.
They really changed Milwaukee for the better.
Along with their radio program, Gay People's Union established GPU News, a newspaper written by and for LGBTQ+ people. The publication found a national audience and introduced readers to singular voices like columnist and trans pioneer Lou Sullivan.
Lou Sullivan wrote articles on historical figures, people with whom he identified, people who were assigned female at birth but had lived as men. He very much recognized and appreciated how important history is to an individual's identity.
Lou Sullivan grew up in Wauwatosa, Wisconsin. His 4th birthday party was a memorable day.
It was a Davy Crockett-themed birthday party. Lou always remembered that when he put on that Davy Crockett costume, he really felt like he was Davy Crockett. His life intersected with so many of the key moments in the baby boomer generation. He liked to brag that he was the most Beatled kid at his school because he knew more about the Beatles than anyone. His idol became Bob Dylan, and he would wear these cowboy boots, bell-bottom jeans. As he moved into his early 20s, then, his idol became, incidentally, his namesake, the rock star Lou Reed.
Lou Sullivan donned a leather jacket, embraced a new identity, and began to live life as a gay trans man.
A lot of people assigned female at birth were really into these pop culture icons, the Beatles, Bob Dylan, Lou Reed. But what was different with Lou is that he both wanted these men and also wanted to be them simultaneously. So the lines between desire and identification were very blurred for him.
Sullivan underwent a mastectomy and received hormone therapy while considering a gender-affirming surgery for years. And although the surgery was an established medical practice by the 1970s, Lou Sullivan's unique request was denied.
I was told that my case was too unusual, that they had never heard of a female-to-male who wanted to be a gay man, that they did not want to be the first to operate and deal with such a person.
His youngest brother, Patrick, died in a motorcycle accident. This is when he realized, you know what, we don't have that long. If I were lying on my deathbed, I would regret not transitioning. This is something I've got to do.
For nearly a decade, Sullivan pleaded the case to medical professionals that someone could be a trans man and also a homosexual. And in 1986, he finally prevailed. A doctor in San Francisco agreed to perform the gender-affirming surgery, charting new territory in the medical field.
As soon as he found someone willing to help him, then he just shouted from the rooftops and spread the word. It spread like wildfire through the trans community.
Lou Sullivan published a groundbreaking guidebook to help both doctors and trans people bridge the gap between sexual orientation and gender identity. Sullivan also shared firsthand experiences with the trans community through his female-to-male newsletter.
As long as no one else is talking about it, it's going to be forever silent and no one's ever going to hear about it. I wanted to connect with people and feeling like an honest person with people. I just don't see any reason to hide it.
Lou was able to be there for countless trans men. There's just nothing like moving in the world and having everyone see you as, you know, you should be seen, as you have known yourself to be for so long.
I spent so many years trying to figure out a place in society. Finally, I could breathe. It felt so good.
People who had decided to lead their authentic lives in Wisconsin had a sense that there were possibilities, including making marriage equality a national reality.
Before marriage equality became a big national movement, one of the first places to actually challenge for the right to marry was Milwaukee in the 70s.
In 1971, Milwaukee natives Donna Burkett and Menonia Evans went to the county clerk's office to apply for a marriage license. The young lesbian couple was promptly denied.
When did you decide to take these steps, and how did you come about that decision?
Well, we decided this summer that we would like to get married, and there shouldn't be any reason why we shouldn't be able to get a license.
A preacher's daughter, Menonia Evans was a junior in college when she met housing rights activist Donna Burkett in a gay bar in Milwaukee's North Side. 2 years later, they would make history.
The act of applying for a marriage license as two women got a lot of media attention.
Jet Magazine ran a feature on the young Milwaukee couple. Their story was also picked up by lesbian and gay publications from around the country.
They were at the front of the movement at that period in time.
The couple was willing to be public about their wish to be married, which was significant.
It really was a big part of the public understanding of what same-sex couples wanted. which was really just what everybody else had.
Donna and Manonia, welcome to Gay Perspective, and we welcome you to our program to express your views.
We're people just like anybody else, and we have feelings too.
I love her, and I don't care who knows. It's not something that I want to hide. Love is not meant to be hidden, and I won't hide it.
Donna Burkett was like, yeah, well, that's what you do. When you love somebody, you go and you marry them.
She felt that she had this right and she wasn't about to accept being denied it.
Burkett and Evans challenged for the right to marry. They filed a federal lawsuit on the grounds that the denial of marital benefits did not afford the couple equal protection under the Constitution. A legal argument ahead of its time.
They shouldn't have any laws on who you can marry or who you can't marry. That's none of their business. If we're living together, we're sharing our money, then we should have some protection.
Donna and Manonia said that they felt they were missing out on tax benefits by not being allowed to marry, which is true. That was a significant part of the fight for marriage equality, was to have the same civil rights that every other married couple had.
The young couple's visionary legal challenge regarding marital benefits was a predecessor for legalizing same-sex marriage nationally 44 years later in 2015. A landmark civil rights case granting equal protection to same-sex couples. And though Burkett and Evans' lawsuit was eventually dismissed on technical grounds, and the couple was refused a legal marriage, their love for each other would not be denied.
Whether or not they obtain a marriage license, they will be married. Christmas Day at St. Nicholas Church in Milwaukee.
Well, God loves all people. Here are two people, and He blesses their love for each other. And so that's what His church is about, is blessing this union, which is sacred of itself.
Burkett and Evans' story would ultimately draw national attention to marriage equality, making a statement not only about love, but also a statement about civil rights for LGBTQ+ people.
Queer people who have had to struggle with fewer rights than their heterosexual counterparts had never thought of even trying to apply for a marriage license before they read about Donna and Manonia trying to do it. And now it was an idea planted in their heads as something that they could fight for in the future.
It was something that would have been unthinkable before Stonewall.
We want more out of life. This is something really worth fighting for.
In Wisconsin, you repeatedly had lesbian and gay publishers and editors who felt the need to have these gay publications here. Gay Endeavor, Escape, In Step, Hag Rag, Wisconsin Light. They were an important part of building community in this state.
These publications often reflected and spoke to specific groups within the growing LGBTQ+ community.
Bi, ? Shy, ? Why, ? As in, why are you shy to be bi? It was an organization to recognize visibility and advocacy for bisexuals. They published a newsletter called Bylines.
It had a little fun in its pages in that regard. But again, it was an example of the need for an expression of the community and a physical manifestation of the community in a publication.
You needed something in community that could take care of and prioritize queer voices in a way that supported them, created space for them to explore their identity, and just educate them around cultural issues. As basic as literally just finding each other.
Leaping Lacrosse News was a smaller newsletter that was published by the lesbian community in La Crosse. It was published for decades in that area.
The Leaping Lacrosse News was established in 1979 and became an ongoing record of vibrant lesbian life outside of Wisconsin's larger cities.
It was the way a lot of women found us, and they'd say, "Holy smoke, I didn't know there were any lesbians in La Crosse." They were just astonished that there could be anything happening in this little town of 50,000 people.
The editor of the newsletter, Mary O'Sullivan, was a college instructor who grew up in a supportive family. In La Crosse, she hoped to build that same support for other women.
Pretty soon we had a thriving community of women who all knew each other and socialized.
The Leaping Lacrosse News opened a whole new world for fellow lesbians, revealing an underground culture that stretched well beyond the bar scene.
If you get lesbians together, the first thing they're going to do is organize potlucks and groups.
The monthly newsletter connected the women with social events, ran news stories impacting the lesbian community, and even covered entertainment and sports.
Just being able to pick up an 8-page newsletter that talked about people like them and with like interests, that was a huge thing.
In 1979, Mary O'Sullivan and some of her friends discovered that a local formal wear shop had been stockpiling discontinued tuxedos for years. Inspiration soon struck.
We could buy these tuxes for like $5 for the whole thing, and we could have a formal wear party.
For some, it was the prom that never was. For others, a great night out, akin to a costume party. But for all, a celebration, a place of acceptance.
We weren't trying to be men or masculine. We were just trying to question the everyday and the accepted. It was an outrageous thing to do, but that was a really empowering kind of experience.
The annual Tux Party continued for a decade, helping La Crosse to later be named the 5th best place in the U.S. for lesbians to live, according to Girlfriends magazine in 2002. The tight-knit group in the small Wisconsin community had created a place all their own.
It was like a big family. And for some women, we were their family because they got kicked out. The world wasn't all that safe then.
Queer people often feel more comfortable with other queer people. They didn't have to worry about being bullied or harassed. They know that their experiences are not singular, that they're not alone.
Often closeted, people all across Wisconsin were finding each other, connecting in a world that had marginalized them, persevering and building meaningful and enriching lives.
We had a real world too.
Yet by the 1970s, there were still no laws in America that protected those lives. Homosexuals were often regarded as criminals. In Wisconsin, the pursuit of equal rights would bring together an unlikely group on the cusp of making history.
It was time to speak out for homosexuals.
Assemblyman Lloyd Barbie was an ally to the gay rights movement. Before his time in the legislature, Barbie was a civil rights attorney who fought housing discrimination and led the effort to desegregate Milwaukee's public schools. Elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly in 1964, he was the only African American in either house of the legislature.
Barbie felt deeply about the American promise that should be extended to all who are part of society. And in his view, Not only African Americans, but homosexuals deserved rights as well.
Barbie was a bold pioneer for social reform and was the first legislator to challenge the sex laws in Wisconsin, calling to decriminalize homosexuality and legalize gay marriage.
He was frequently referred to in the press as the outrageous Mr. Barbie because he introduced these bills that were way, way before their time, but thank goodness he did.
He believed in introducing legislation to educate folks, and he was not shy about this.
He stuck to his principles and objectives, and he took a lot of flack because of that.
I think the homosexuals should not be harassed and beaten down and brutalized and insulted, and we should not tolerate it.
Morality laws that had been on the books since the 1800s criminalized a variety of sexual acts, applying to everyone, not just homosexuals.
Most people didn't recognize how restrictive Wisconsin statutes were in criminalizing sex acts that were pretty commonplace. Things like oral sex. Even between a man and a woman who are legally, lawfully married was a criminal offense in Wisconsin.
Yet these morality laws were selectively enforced, a means to target and prosecute homosexuals.
It was an excuse for rooting out gays and lesbians and bisexuals in the state.
In 1974, at the age of 21, David Klarenbach was the youngest member elected to the Wisconsin State Assembly.
I certainly had known that I was gay before I was elected to public office, but it wasn't a time when I felt comfortable to come out, especially as an extraordinarily young candidate.
Klarenbach grew up in Madison, his family heavily involved in social reform movements. His mother, Catherine, was a co-founder of the National Organization for Women, the largest feminist group in America. In the legislature, David Klarenbach teamed up with Lloyd Barbie.
Lloyd Barbie was not just my role model and my mentor, but he really was a prophet.
Together, they drove legislation to completely overhaul the sex laws in Wisconsin. But the two men were unsuccessful in gaining enough support from their fellow lawmakers to advance such broad reform.
It's not the job of the state.
In 1977, Lloyd Barbie left the legislature.
Barbie passed the baton on sex reform leadership to David.
Rather than introducing bills calling for sweeping change, Klarenbach instead focused on single-issue legislation.
The author, what does it do? Why did you bring it?
He would land on the Consenting Adults Bill, a law which would repeal the morality laws that criminalized homosexuality.
They want those in violation of those statutes put in jail.
The basic premise of homophobia is that homosexuals are criminals.
The Consenting Adults Bill faced an uphill battle, taking Klarenbach years to advance it.
Each session, it gained a little more traction. It kept moving forward. And then, finally, in 1981, the Consenting Adults Law came to a vote in the Assembly, and we lost it by one vote.
A narrow defeat. But with bipartisan support, hope was still alive.
This was a question of momentum.
The bill had both Republican and Democrats supporting it.
It proved a legislator could cast a vote for gay rights and not feel that they're jeopardizing their own re-election campaign.
In Wisconsin, an opportunity was within reach. Clarenbach signed on to co-sponsor a non-discrimination gay rights bill, which would add sexual orientation to protected non-discrimination categories, such as race, age, and religion, ensuring someone could not be fired from their job or denied a mortgage for being homosexual. For the bill to succeed, an expansive coalition of support would need to be built from the ground up.
The gay rights movement would not have advanced if it weren't for gay bars and a gay press.
The gay press kept people informed, tracking the progress of the bill through the legislature, while gay bars became a place for people to organize, creating an outreach effort to build public support for the bill. However, to convince some lawmakers who were on the fence, the gay rights movement needed to gain an unlikely ally, one that had condemned homosexuality for centuries.
We needed to get religious support from the mainstream religious community.
The leader in the outreach effort was Leon Rouse, a UW-Milwaukee student activist who organized a supportive group of pastors and rabbis.
You had to knock on doors and say, tell us what you think about homosexuals and about homosexual issues. It took some bravery to start knocking on those doors.
Rouse was short of a vital endorsement. The head of Milwaukee's Catholic Church, Archbishop Rembert Weekland. After weeks of attending Mass, Rouse finally approached the Archbishop with his pitch.
It's not whether homosexuality is being approved, it's whether discrimination is tolerable.
Could discrimination and bigotry be tolerated against any group in our society? That question turned the tide.
Archbishop Weekland pledged his support.
Archbishop Weekland said that we have to see gay people not as an enemy to be battered down, but as persons worthy of respect and friendship.
It was decisive, earth-shattering that a Catholic archbishop would advocate in such a public way.
In December of 1981, the Gay Rights Non-Discrimination Bill passed in the Wisconsin Assembly, moving on to the state Senate for a final vote.
It was going to be close, and we had one shot at this.
On that fateful day, the LGBTQ+ community would not stand alone.
Well, to be able to sit in the Senate chambers and see the galleries packed with nuns and priests and other religious leaders sent the message that it was a moral statement to oppose discrimination and bigotry against any group in our society.
The non-discrimination bill passed in the Senate with religious backing and bipartisan support. On February 25, 1982, the nation's first gay rights legislation was signed into law by Wisconsin Republican Governor Lee Sherman Dreyfus.
It was an exciting moment.
We accomplished something that no one thought was possible. No one would have guessed in 1982 that of all states, Wisconsin would be the first state in the nation to enact civil rights protections for gays and lesbians. But Wisconsin became known as the gay rights state.
Within a year, Wisconsin passed the Consenting Adults Bill, followed by 3 additional landmark pieces of legislation protecting civil rights. All starting with a vision for the future, the courage to bridge a gap, and the belief in equality.
You did not have to be a female to believe in equal rights for women, any more than you needed to be LGBT or Q to be supportive of gay and lesbian civil rights. Civil rights are for everyone.
Wisconsin registered its first official case of AIDS, an epidemic that has resulted in nearly 500 deaths, mostly among homosexual men.
The AIDS crisis hit like a bolt of lightning.
We just felt that we were under siege, seeing our community dying around us.
Among that community was Alan Hess, co-founder of Gay People's Union, and in San Francisco, Wisconsin native and trans pioneer Lou Sullivan.
I discovered that I had AIDS. I was diagnosed with AIDS.
It was just heartbreaking, gut-wrenching. So many obstacles to overcome in order to transition, only to be diagnosed as having AIDS.
They tried to deny him to live as a homosexual, but he would die as a homosexual.
From the outset of the AIDS crisis, a second epidemic was born, one of fear.
We've got a lot of homophobia floating around, and it doesn't surprise me.
It's almost like, being a leper in olden times. You go put them in the dirtiest parts of the village and keep them away from society.
I wouldn't even feel free to hug somebody. Just because they got the scare in you, I guess. I don't know.
As the disease spread throughout the country, Wisconsin remained committed as the gay rights state. In 1983, newly elected Governor Tony Earl formed the Council on Gay and Lesbian Issues, a group that helped lay the groundwork for a public health response to the deadly disease.
Governor Earl was such an outspoken supporter of the gay and lesbian community.
By 1985, he signed legislation that protected the confidentiality of people who tested for the virus. And in 1990, the state's next governor, Tommy Thompson, signed the AIDS Bill of Rights, which prohibited insurance companies from discriminating against people with AIDS.
The bill's believed to be the first of its kind in the country.
People weren't going to be fired from their jobs or denied health insurance coverage because of their HIV status.
Legal protections were guaranteed in Wisconsin. But with no cure, the deadly crisis continued into a second decade.
Reporting on AIDS is a little like reporting on war, a grim listing of the latest statistics.
Unfortunately, ongoing, continuing crises are easily forgotten.
We're here today to protest the city of Milwaukee's callous indifference to the AIDS crisis.
The next generation of activists fought public fatigue with confrontational and attention-grabbing actions.
AIDS activists passed out more condoms and pamphlets at a Milwaukee high school this morning.
Organizations like ACT UP kept the spotlight focused on the AIDS crisis and how that was affecting the real lives of real people.
In Madison, ACT UP led a massive protest over conditions for inmates with AIDS. The event brought hundreds to the Capitol, including future Advice columnist Dan Savage and longtime activist Judy Greenspan.
AIDS in prison is a death sentence.
I visited a lot of prisons. I met with a lot of prisoners with HIV. They were not getting medications. They were being segregated.
All they got for lunch and dinner was peanut butter and jelly sandwiches that would be shoved at them.
ACT UP responded with a special delivery to the state capitol, hundreds of peanut butter sandwiches, and a series of public protests.
It was an in-your-face action to say, look, stop this. It's outrageous. How they were treating prisoners with HIV was absolutely horrible.
the activism and the legislative victories were an effort to try and do something positive in the face of what was still a terrible epidemic for the state to face.
There's not a silver lining to it, but if there was one, it's that the LGBTQ plus community was united, galvanized, and motivated.
The spirit of activism continued into the 1990s. Protesters in Wisconsin led a nationwide effort to push back against the military's refusal to accept gays and lesbians. In 2011, LGBTQ plus people could finally serve openly. And in 2022, Senator Tammy Baldwin guided federal legislation that was signed into law protecting same-sex marriage, part of the ongoing pursuit of civil rights.
People have fought for it, have overcome the obstacles, but LGBTQ plus rights are not static.
That fight is still incredibly real and ongoing, but there's hope.
The progress has just been amazing.
Being able to publicly say, the most important person in my life is this person right next to me, and we're gonna have a wonderful damn life for all the years that we've got.
Times have changed dramatically.
Through the struggles, through the victories, Wisconsin history was written.
History is made by individuals.
The individuals they come out of, they reflect Wisconsin history.
Wisconsin is fortunate to have a lot of LGBTQ heroes throughout its history.
They had refused to be ashamed of who they were. It was just powerful. They were remarkable people, brave people.
Funding for Wisconsin Pride is provided by Park Bank, S.C. Johnson, Greater Milwaukee Foundation, Evue Foundation, the charitable arm of the Capital Times, CUNA Mutual Group, New Harvest Foundation, West Foundation, Paula Bonner and Ann Schaefer, La Crosse Community Foundation, MG&E Foundation, Rogers Behavioral Health, with additional support from and with support from Focus Fund for Wisconsin Programs and Friends of PBS Wisconsin.